Welcome to Engaging Reluctant Readers panel. In this panel, you will be able to ask questions to our panelists and comment in the Q&A session. Look at the bottom of your screen for the Q&A and use that. There is no chat that will be available in the other sessions that you attend. These panels are just question and answer. Also, please know that at the bottom of the screen, there's a closed captioning button so that you may enable closed captioning if you need it. I'd like to introduce Ann Writing. She will be moderating this session.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be with you. As we were putting this conference together, I was thinking about who are all my really good friends that I need to invite. And so I'm excited to have these four wonderful authors to be with us today. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but maybe some really sweet slides. So we all know Jennifer. She's our favorite local, and maybe we don't understand what quite a jewel we have here, but she's a New York Times bestselling author, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. And then if you want to go, yeah, thanks. And Dan, send Dan too many emails, you get back a lot of fun. This book Jennifer's came out Tuesday, Rescue. Dan's just came out, Houdini and Me came out on Tuesday. Oh, marvelous. And happy to have him. He was born in New York City. And as you can see, some other information, we'll let him tell you more about himself. And then we've also got Roland, met him at AASL. And finally, we have Ascent that came out, really looking forward. I started it, but I needed to get a little sleep. And then of course we've got Dusti Bowling. This is her latest book, The Canyon's Edge. I love the insignificant events in the life of a cactus. Let's move on and let's go ahead and have Jennifer do a little bit of introduction and actually have all of our authors, please come on and let's start this panel. So Jen, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Ann, and thank you for such kind words. Though I really feel like here in Utah, if you throw a rock in any direction, you're going to hit an author who you probably love. We are so wealthy here with authors, and it's really a privilege to associate with such a talented community as we have right here at home, and also to be part of this event with such other authors that I am big fans of, and so it's just really a privilege to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, Rescue came out on Tuesday. This is a World War II historical that involves the spies and the secret missions and codes of World War II. But I'm actually going to briefly tell you about this one. This is The Captive Kingdom, which is book 4 of the False Prince series. If you didn't know, I did a book 4. And this is probably the one I get the very most email about for reluctant readers. And so I thought that's why I bring this up. It begins with the story of a boy being forced to impersonate royalty. And then I just, make life harder on him from there. But the emails, in terms of reluctant readers, just floor me. One from a boy who was severely dyslexic, but he loved the book so much that he was working his way through it with all of the challenges that might entail. One from a class of very low income students who were they were giving up their lunch money. They weren't eating so that they could afford to get the next book in the series. And don't worry, I sent them the books so they could have lunch. But most notably from a British man who picked up an adult. He picked up a copy of the book from a secondhand store. He'd never read a book in his life, and wrote me to say he finished the series. So I'm very pleased to be on this panel to talk about something I feel very, very strongly about, which is how we get our non-readers to fall in love with books.
I didn't even know that about you, Jen. I'm so glad that you said yes to be with us. Roland, would you please introduce yourself and your passion for our audiences?
All right. First of all, I want to say hello to all the teachers and librarians out there. It's been a tough year for you. And not so much tough for me because I spend most of my time in this room, even when there isn't a pandemic. So, I mean, it's, but my two daughters are teachers. Two of my daughters are teachers, and we have a 6-year-old living in the house who's been doing this online stuff and now hybrid stuff. And I have no idea how you guys do that. I mean, it's like a mystery to me that you had to put up with this for a year, but it is getting better. And so I'm honored to be here at this conference, and I've been kind of lurking all day long, listening to the other authors. What a great thing you put together. This for those who haven't been involved in putting this together, this was a hard thing to do for them, I'm certain. But I'm Roland Smith. I'm sitting in Oregon. I'm sitting in my office where I work on my books. I've written 40 plus books, like Peak, which some of you are familiar with, and then the last Peak book. There's 4 of them: Descent, and The Captain's Dog. I'm trying to pick books that are well known in Utah, and Cryptid Hunters. And I really miss all of you guys. I mean, I really miss being on the road. I didn't think I would miss being on the road so much, but I really miss talking to teachers live and kids live. When I write a book, I write about, first of all, what's important to me. And I'm not sure that I write for reluctant readers. I write for myself. And it just happens to be that reluctant readers really like my books, which I'm grateful for. So I'm not really sure in my head that I go, okay, I'm going to do this for a reluctant reader. I mean, I never matured past 12 years old. And so I kind of write for myself pretty much about the things that are important to me at any particular time. And but I'm looking forward to hearing what the other authors have to say if they actually do kind of target reluctant readers. I'm going to be maybe the odd guy out because I don't really do that. I just try to write a story that I would like. And I was never a reluctant reader. I grew up in the 50s, and we had nothing else to do but read books. So I was always a big reader. I hear from lots of authors say they didn't read until they got out of high school or whatever. I was a kid who read from when I was 5 years old. I love books, still do. So that's my intro.
Awesome. Roland, I think you spoiled it all. Telling,
Of course.
I think all of you, I'm sure, write for really good things, but we'll talk more about that. But you're not the odd person out. You totally belong. I messed up the order I told you, but I'm just going to cross on my screen because that's what teachers do when they're teaching online. So we'll have Dusti introduce herself, and then we'll go to Dan.
Hi, I'm Dusti Bowling, and I'm in Arizona, which is a huge inspiration for my stories. If you've read them, you've probably figured that out. And I write middle grade. This is the book that was just mentioned that just came out, The Canyon's Ed, which is actually a novel in verse, which I greatly enjoyed writing. I feel like I always have reluctant readers in mind when I'm drafting. I'm thinking about chapter lengths and humor. This book doesn't have as much humor. I usually use a lot of humor in my books in order to try to engage readers in any way that I can. But the short format, all the white space, I'm thinking of things like that. I always have reluctant readers in mind when I'm writing. And I think that this book, I don't have a book yet, it comes out in about a month, is going to be especially great for reluctant readers. It's actually my very first try at a chapter book series. So again, shorter length, shorter chapters, illustrations, lots of humor. I love writing. It works out for me well because I love writing that way, because I myself have become a reluctant reader as I've gotten older. I grew up loving to read so much that it led me to become an author. But with the in the age of screens and social media and everything, I found my attention span sort of hurting and waning a bit. So I try to write to the kids who are possibly having the same issues that I'm having with their attention spans and things like that. And so I also really, try to push the whole, screen time thing all the time, because I do think it's impacting our abilities to read longer books and things like that. But I do also, of course, always write about the issues that are important to me, the issues that I care about. And that's where this book came from, which comes out in October, Across the Desert, which has to do with a character who has a mom who's an opioid addict, which I grew up with. But instead of just having the story be about that, I like to wrap these issues that are important to me in these more exciting stories occurring around them, so that hopefully I can draw my readers in with an exciting, quickly paced story, but also that is speaking to them about issues that I care about, that I think are important to a lot of kids out there right now as well. So that's kind of my tactic.
Okay. All right, your turn, Dan.
Hey, Roland, didn't you watch TV when you were a kid?
Yeah, we had 3 channels, black and white. Yeah.
Because all I did was watch TV. I hated to read when I was a kid. I thought reading was boring and hard to do. And my mother was worried about me. And she used to buy me comic books, hoping it would get me interested in reading. And it didn't really work. And it wasn't until I was in 4th grade that I became a big sports fan, and suddenly I wanted to know everything about sports. And that's what got me into reading. So I write all kinds of books. Because I have a short attention span, I write for little kids, like picture books like Rappy the Raptor. He's a rapping raptor who raps. And for beginning readers, I do a series called My Weird School, which is about this school where all the kids are relatively normal, but the grown-ups are all crazy in one way or another. So that's for kids who, like to laugh, just silly stories. And I really like historical fiction. I write about this baseball card adventure series about this kid who has the power to travel through time with a baseball card. And he goes on adventures with baseball players from the past. And you might know me from The Kid Who Ran for President, about a kid who runs for president. And I do lots of other stuff like The Genius Files and historical fiction, Flashback 4, stuff like that. And I'm just thrilled to be here. I've only been to Utah once in my life. I went on a ski trip. It was great, but I'd love to come back sometime and see the rest of your wonderful state. And I'm honored to be part of this panel too.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. You all have a rain check. We usually do a dinner the night before. And so when you come to Utah, you have a rain check for a dinner. And we do have the National AASL Conference coming in October. Well, let's go ahead and let's have a discussion. Let's see here. So our topic is how to engage reluctant readers. And I think you've already kind of answered this. Dusti said that she does on purpose write for reluctant readers. Do any of the rest of you, or is that just a really great side benefit of your wonderful writing?
I certainly do, but it's not like I like dumb it down for anybody. Like Roland said, I kind of naturally write what I want to read. And being a reluctant reader myself, I think I relate to those kids like that. Even though Roland was a big reader when he was a kid, I was not. But I just write for me, and reluctant readers seem to gravitate towards that.
How about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's the same. And I think Roland, you and I would have that in common. And Dan, I write for what I like to read. And so I do. I like short chapters. I like cliffhangers at the end of chapters, so that I'm like, oh, you thought you were going to go to sleep? No, one more chapter. And I like high adventure. I like humor. And so I'm writing for myself. And I think most of us do. And so if we connect with reluctant readers, that's great. But honestly, I write for all readers. And I'm so glad when reluctant readers are part of that.
I always wondered, as an author, how do you consider your audience? I mean, who are you envisioning as you are writing?
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I really envision one person. It's probably a group of people, and it is basically young readers. I mean, middle grade, upper elementary. So I think there are readers out there, but again, as I said, I'm not very mature. And so for me, I kind of write for myself, really. That's kind of my mindset. I mean, I say that I'm 12. My wife says I'm probably 10 years old, you know what I mean? And you know, even though I'm an old guy now, I still have really young attitudes. I love children's literature. I've read a lot of it. I read a lot of it and will continue to read a lot of it. It's very entertaining to me. So I'm not really sure that I have in mind a reader. I guess I'm careful with vocabulary a little bit. You know, I mean, I realize that, you know, my vocabulary is probably better than the readers, and I don't want to put in story stoppers by using a word or a phrase or even a concept that they can't quite get again, because as everybody here said, you want to write a book that's exciting and moves along. You do not want stoppers in there and use a word that basically nobody understands but me. I mean, that kind of thing goes. So in that sense, I'm aware of what the vocabulary might be like for the reluctant reader or for the people who read my books. But I think to some degree that's the case with adult books as well. I mean, I think that most thrillers, New York Times best thrillers for adults, if you were to break them down, they're at about the 5th or 6th grade level. I mean, it happens with adults books as well as books for young adults, you know what I mean? So I think all authors, whether they're adult or children's authors like we are kind of aware of that, because you do have to pick and choose what you, word by word, what you put in the book and concept by concept, because you don't want them to go, what do you mean? You want the story to kind of continue to flow.
You mentioned that the adult books are really low level. As a librarian, I've looked at the Lexile score. That's what teachers use. And John Grisham, for an example, his children's books are much higher level than his adult books. And I just thought that was interesting. Sorry, that was my own side. But we do have a question in our question and answers that really fits in well here. Karen Larson has asked, what do you focus on to appeal to the reluctant reader? And since Dusti was talking about how much she writes that way, if you will answer that one, and if anyone else wants to add, please do.
Yeah, I do. I think it helps that I naturally like to write a lot of humor. And I think that humor is a great way to pull kids in. So when I'm drafting, I write the humor that comes naturally. But when I go and I start my revisions, I'm always looking for, like, is there something humorous I can insert here or there to just continuously hold their attention, especially during slower parts, things like that. In my quicker adventure stories, I don't feel the need to insert so much humor, but like in quieter friendship story, I want there to be a lot of dialogue, a lot of humor, a lot of silliness. And then also just, again, making sure I break up my chapters, leaving cliffhangers, things like that. I don't personally like super long chapters when I'm reading. So I also do the things that I would enjoy that I know would hold my attention in a book. And also I'm always thinking of when I write my stories, I outline now, and I didn't used to. And so my stories would kind of meander all over the place. So I always have like an end goal, a climax in mind. And I know what what's called the inciting incident is in the story. It's like the story that, or the point in the story that sets the plot, you know, the main character moving down their path on the plot. And so I try to always get to that as quickly as possible. So when I'm drafting, I always think, where's my inciting incident? When does the plot really start going? And then I try to cut as much before that as I can to get there as quickly as possible, because I don't want to lose their attention in the beginning by having too much world building or too much explanation or description. I want to get there, and then all that other stuff that I've cut, I can maybe sprinkle throughout elsewhere or something. But yes, I'm always thinking of how do I not lose my reader's attention.
Can I mention something? Dusti and Jennifer both mentioned cliffhangers, and as a way to kind of motivate the student to turn the pages. And I also feel that way about, I feel like every sentence I write should lead to the next sentence, and every paragraph should lead to the next paragraph. And as Roland said, if you have you called it a stopper, I think, Anytime you have to read a sentence twice or a paragraph twice because you don't understand it, well, you're going to lose a reader right there. And I like my stuff to be so smooth that every sentence flows into the next, every paragraph into the next, every chapter into the next. And you kind of pull the reader along that way. And that's one way I think we all know how to get reluctant readers to join us in this kind of adventure we're writing.
And by the way, Dan's books are exactly that. They're smooth and
Thanks, Roland.
they're a lot of fun.
Thanks.
I think the term reluctant reader is interesting. I sort of think it's up to teachers and librarians to find the reluctant reader. It's not really up to me. I try to write a book that I think kids will like, and then you guys know the person who's reading, and if you find the right book for that person, they're not a reluctant, from my experience, as long as they don't have a mechanical disability, they have trouble reading. Once they find a book, and this has happened to me, and I'm sure everybody here, you've gotten letters saying I wasn't a reader, but now I'm a huge reader because of your book. I mean, that's like the big thrill of the day. It lasts me about 2 weeks when I get a letter like that. But I always think of the teacher or the librarian who read one of my books and said, you know what, I think Susie would like this book, and gives that to Susie and says, you don't have to read this, but you might want to. I mean, you don't want to tell them to read it. And then they read it and go, I read an entire book. That's a huge accomplishment. I remember the first book I read as a kid, which was Cricket in Times Squares. I just love that book. And once I finished it, I don't even remember much about the story, but I remember the feeling that I got when I actually read the entire book. And I think that from that point on, providing there's no other problems, because you teachers and you librarians match kids with books, that's what changes things. I mean, that's what changes things for so-called reluctant readers. They just never come across a book that really resonated with them.
Well, Dusty brought up humor. I think I got in trouble trying to be humorous last week, so I've got to ask you all. Humor is definitely a big favorite, and I'm not very good at it. So how, as authors, is humor something that naturally comes to you? It's just something you add to your writing? Is there like courses that you took on how to be funny as a writer? How do you get that humor in there? Because that's how I know as a librarian I can hook someone. And by the way, Roland, thanks for passing the buck. You just keep writing good books. We'll keep passing them on. But let's talk about humor. How about you, Jennifer? Because I love your adventure stories, but that humor just really, that's what keeps me reading.
It's just my sense of humor. When you study humor artistically, humor is far more serious than drama. And so there really is something about it, and it's about humor is about timing, and it's about putting truth in with unexpected. But every single one of us has our own different sense of humor and our own way of applying it within a novel. And then some kids get it, and then some kids, it's just not their style, and that's fine. That's why there's so many different authors that we have books for all children. Mine is it's just what makes me laugh. And if it does, it goes in.
Hey, how about you, Dan? You're really known for, even the covers make you laugh.
I got nothing to do with that. But I grew up reading Mad Magazine and watching Laugh-In and Get Smart and F Troop and reading National Lampoon and watching Saturday Night Live and movies by Mel Brooks and Woody Allen. And that was just naturally what I came to absorb. And so my problem, if anything, is that I have to tone the humor down, because people will say, you're all over the place. You're just being silly. And sometimes I want to be silly, and sometimes kids just want to read silly stuff. But it, like all of us, it's not like we took some class like, this is how you make a joke. You just say funny stuff, and kids, I think, much more than adults respond to it because they're silly and they like to laugh,
Yeah, we should all laugh a lot. Talking about covers, I think what you made was a really good point. Reluctant readers totally judge a book by their cover. I could read a library by looking at the covers, which isn't fair. But if the cover passed the muster, then I need to open it. And I can tell by the font whether or not a kid's going to read a book. If it was printed in the 60s, they're not likely to want to read it. It's just the way kids are now. But let's talk about your role as an author on the physical design, because Dusty was talking about the white space and the look of your books. How much say do you have in that physical part of your book? Let's have Roland start with this, and then we'll
Sure.
have each of you.
To answer it quickly, not much. I mean, it's usually up to the publisher to do that. And I like most of my covers. I mean, there's 40 plus of them, and I like most of them. There's been a very few problems along the way. I wrote a historical novel about World War II called Elephant Run. And in the original cover, they had an American fighter plane or fighter bomber bombing England. And I wrote them and said, you know, they were our allies. We didn't bomb London, England. And they said, this is a true story. It's a big publisher too. They said, oh, no one will notice. I go, well, you know, I'll notice. And so that has to be changed. You know, you can't have us bombing London. We didn't do that. Germany did that. And they said, well, it's going to be a big hassle. And I went, I actually don't care. If it's a big hassle, you got to change that. And so they kind of aired out the star on the wing of the airplane bombing London, you know what I mean? And it was sort of a neutral plane. My point about that is that I only mention the cover if it's like historically or wrong. You know, I mean, if it's a wrong thing, you guys really have to change that. It's an argument that I don't choose to pick unless there's something really egregious about the cover that they've come out with. But I'd say 99% of the time, I think they do a fabulous job. And you have to bear in mind that publishers really don't necessarily control the words so much. I mean, it's really my book. They make good edits and they're great at doing that and stuff, but the final say is mine. And so that's kind of one of their things. And they know more about covers than I know about covers. You know what I mean? I don't pick up books by covers. I pick up books usually by authors. I'll come along and I'll see Dusty's book, or I'll see Dan's book or Jennifer's book and say, oh yeah, I want to read that. That's the new book. I don't really care what the cover looks like. So you don't have a lot of control. My experience is you don't have a lot of control unless you want to be termed as a kind of a real prima donna author, and nobody wants that moniker.
Dan, you said you didn't have a lot of choice on your cover, but I noticed that your books have nice big font. Is that something that your publisher decided to do with it, or was that something that you had input on?
Publisher, yeah. I don't feel like I have much control over the covers. And I kind of feel like publishers think of us authors as people who we're verbal people and we don't really have a great visual sense. So we should not be allowed to, you know, make decisions about the covers, because those marketing people, they know better than us, you know. I would agree that most of my covers are really good and I'm happy with them. Every so often there's, you know, one that I'm not happy with, and I'll mention it, even though I don't have cover approval. And I've had arguments with my publishers over covers, and I usually lose those arguments. And there's nothing I can do about it. But, you know, I work with Jim Palat, the guy who does the pictures for My Weird School. He's fantastic. We've been working together for 17 years now on this series, and we've done like 70 plus books together. And Jim and I have only met each other once, okay? He lives in Arizona and I live in New York City, so we communicate by email and text and stuff. And we work together great. I love his stuff, but you know, some of my covers have not been great, and I've complained about it, and I only have so much control because I don't, as Roland said, I don't want to look like I'm a prima donna. But, you know, it could really hurt the sales of your book if they give you a messed up cover and they, you know, put an American logo on a plane. That's horrible. I can't believe they did that.
Yeah. Now, Dusty, you talked about the white space inside. how do you work with your publisher on what you envision and then what happens?
So I feel like, I'm totally with Roland and Dan when it comes to the covers. Like, I have virtually no control over my covers, and most of my titles have also been changed from what I had wanted, but it's usually a positive change once I think about it. And, it's like the salespeople, they know what they're doing a little bit better than I do when it comes to marketing and all of that. There have been some issues with my covers, like this one I had zero control over. And I even said, a saguaro cactus bloom is not pink. That's scientifically incorrect. And you'll notice that it is still pink on the cover. So I have very little say. But on the inside, yeah. So when it came to the Canyon's Edge specifically, I had a lot of control over the interior, luckily. And so there is space because it's written in verse. I control the line breaks where I want them to be in my poems. And I even came up with ideas to, design the words in ways that reflected what they were saying. And they were so wonderful, my publisher, to work with me on creating this vision that I had for how they're shaped, like canyons or water flowing or things like that. And so I feel like I have a ton of control over those sorts of issues. When it comes to a book written in prose, though, the most control I have over the white space there is, again, it's like where I break my chapters and stuff, because you're going to have solid blocks of text no matter what, but also not having too long of paragraphs helps a lot too. So breaking up your paragraphs, not having like a whole page that's a paragraph, will help with the white space. So yeah, I feel like I have total control over the interior. No edits or revisions are made. I mean, I make them all, and then it's a collaboration, of course. They don't go in there and like change your story ever, at least not in my experience. But yeah, when it comes to the outside, forget about it.
Okay, well, Jen, you have absolutely gorgeous book covers. It's very easy to entice someone to read that. Did you have any say at all?
It's the funny thing about going last is now I get to just piggyback off of everybody else's awesomeness. Dusty, you talked about the the problem on yours. I was like, you guys know that gold doesn't shatter, right? Like, that's not a thing. And I love the cover, but it just bothers me forever that like, it doesn't do that. That's not ever a thing. Roland, you talked about the fighter planes for resistance. My editor was like, what model of German bomber would have been over the Warsaw Ghetto on April 19th, 1943? And I'm like, are you kidding me? How would I possibly know that? And they're like, well, you've got to know it because there's going to be some 5th grade kid somewhere who's going to be an expert in German bomber planes on April 19th, 1943. And you know what? I met that kid.
Yeah.
Like, that's totally a thing. And so, yeah, like details, getting them correct. I don't do it. The one thing that I do take credit for is in like the Ascendant series, I do create the map. And now it doesn't look like this when I draw it. When I draw it, it looks like a 1st grader did it. But I love maps, and I love maps for reluctant readers, because this is something that they can really get in with and just be like, oh, okay, well, they're here and they got to get here. And it's just, it creates a visual to help keep straight when I'm oriented into a big world that I might be creating.
Oh, thank you so much. We have a comment from Julie that I need to share with everyone. It says, we librarians so appreciate you all for creating gripping content in a way that hooks students. I love that I can confidently and easily recommend your books to students as a good way to spend some time. So thank you all. This year, more than ever, teens have not been able to escape the screen. In many communities, they do not have easy or consistent access to paper books. What are your views on adapting books to video? Have any of you worked on a video project related to your writing?
Not me.
Anybody have a movie coming out?
I'm in some early talks, but it's still really early. But the fact is, the book is, of course, we all know it's always better. And so ultimately, whether a movie is ever made or not, it's always about the books.
People always ask us, are you going to make your book into a movie or a TV series? And I always tell them that there's not much an author can do to make that happen. It's really up to somebody in Hollywood to discover your book and decide to make it into a TV show or a movie. So if any of you happen to know Steven Spielberg personally, slip him one of my books, okay? Do me a favor.
Okay.
We're actively pitching one of my books right now with the team. I have like a producer and a bunch of people working on it, and I've been included a lot. So we've had a lot of discussions about, you know, the vision for what it will become. I can't say too much about it, but I've had some things that I said I absolutely, to let you have these rights, like I absolutely have to have this authenticity in the main character, for example, and luckily the whole team is on board. So hopefully we'll see that at some point in the future, but who knows, because COVID has kind of thrown a big wrench in everything. So.
Well, almost all of my novels have been optioned for film at one time or another, some of them several times. And I've written a couple of screenplays for my novels, and none of them have ever been produced. And the first time I wrote a novel called Thunder Cave, and it got optioned by Disney, and you know, we thought they were going to make a movie, and my wife made a big mistake. She went to the grocery store and she paid full price for peaches because we knew we were going to be rich. She's never made that mistake again, ever. You know what I mean? And so it happens 2 or 3 times a year. Someone calls, a producer calls, and says, "Oh, I want to make a movie." You go, "Great." And essentially nothing happens. So we never depend on it because like Dan said, it's not up to us. And of course, I just had a big string of letters last week from a school saying you should turn Zach's Lie into a movie. Well, you have to write the same thing. It's actually pretty easy to write them back because I've written the email like 300 times. You know, we don't control that. It costs millions and millions of dollars to make movies. Many books get optioned, but that doesn't mean there's going to be a thing. And Dan's right. We write the books. Somebody else really makes the movies. And as far as movies being better or worse, I'd be happy to have mine turn into a movie because it'd be really good for the book. Would it be like the book? No. I mean, if you filmed Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter, like Harry Potter was, the movie would be 22 hours long. You can't do that. So obviously making a film and reading a novel are just totally different things. You know, I mean, it's impossible for them to be the same as it is for the book. Although I have to say, I have seen movies that I like better than the book. A few times.
Hey, Roland,
It's rare, though.
I used to get all excited every time I'd get an email from somebody saying, "We're interested in, you know, turning your book into a movie." And over the years, that every time something like that happened, I would get all excited. And now I totally refuse to get excited because 99.9% of the time that deal is going to fall through. So
Yeah.
Well, one thing that does happen to your books is they become audiobooks. And that is another way that really works for reluctant readers. One of my own children, it was Harry Potter. His older siblings were all reading Harry Potter. So he actually went the half mile to the library, borrowed the book on CD. You know, he's in his 20s now, got the physical book and put those two together. But those audiobooks are really, really connecting our reluctant readers to books that they might not be able to read in print. And I understand that none of you really have a lot to do with those being created, but I know that False Prince has been on vacation with me. We loved the narrator. We're narrator snobs in my family.
I'm just going to interrupt. That's Charlie McWade, and he's absolutely brilliant. I do get to audition my audiobook narrators, so
Good.
but yeah, Charlie McWade, gold.
I actually auditioned to become the narrator of my Houdini book. And I did an audition, and they actually said that I could do it if I wanted to do it. And then I played my audition for my wife and my daughter, and they said, no. They said the story should be narrated by somebody who sounds like a child, not some grown man. It just sounds weird, Dad. So I didn't do it.
Well, I love audiobooks. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I actually read books and then have the audio thing and kind of go back and forth and stuff depending on what I'm doing, because I really want to get the stories done. And you're right, not all the books become audio, but more and more of them I think are becoming audio. Years ago that wasn't the case. Now the technology must be less expensive because they're really pushing a lot of audio books. Most of my books are in audio now, and I'm very happy, and I listen to them. When I'm driving around, sometimes my own books, and call my wife, and I'm on the road and I go, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm listening to a book." She goes, "What is it?" He goes, "It's great. It's Peak by Roland Smith. It's beautiful." When you listen to your book, it's weird. It's almost as if you didn't write it. It's a strange sensation. You forget about everything. You kind of get caught up in the story, and I forget about it. I go, "I wrote that. Wow."
That's great. Oh, it has been so delightful talking with all of you. I have one more question that I just really want to ask. I just want to know, what is your favorite thing about being an author? And I think that would be a great way for us to wrap up. So let's go with Dusti and Jennifer, and then Roland and Dan. Just watching time right here, because we want to make sure that Jennifer and Dusti, sorry, Jennifer, ignore that. Dusti and Roland both have sessions at 11 for the audience who would like to communicate with them more. It will be in a Zoom meeting, so there will be chat. You'll be able to talk more. Right now, we are in a very large meeting, so that's why we don't have the chat working. But let's wrap up with, what's your very favorite thing about being an author?
Since we've been talking about reluctant readers so much, one of my most favorite things is when I do get a letter or an email from a child who says, "I didn't like reading until I read your books and they're my favorite, and will you please write another one?" So that's always a really wonderful experience. It makes you feel like all that work, that blood, sweat, and tears and time that you poured into this book was completely worth it. But also just the thought that any child out there is reading my books, and that maybe one day they'll look back on them as, being as important to their life and as special to them as so many books were to me when I was a child, that I get to do that for my job. And that is possibly an end result, is just a really fulfilling part of my job, and keeps me motivated to keep on writing day after day after day.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the young readers. I remember I was in Chicago area, and there was going to be a lunch, and specific kids were invited in to have this lunch with an author. Well, there was this one girl who came in early, and I thought that was odd. I thought she should be in class, but there she was, and all the adults are talking, but I write for her, so of course I'm going to go to her, and I tried talking with her, and it was like one word answers, if that. And I was like, "You think you're the first tough young person I've ever had to talk to? Like, this is nothing." And I would have humor with her and talk with her. And pretty soon I was getting multiple word answers, and then sentences, and then laughter, and then joy. And we talked for some time before the actual lunch began. And when the lunch was over, the librarian just came up and hugged me, and she said, "You don't even know." And I said, "No, I don't know. I don't know what anything about her." This was fall. The spring before, she said last year, this girl was in my library every single day, just here to read another book. And she says, "This is the first time I've seen her this year. She's become my reluctant reader." And the reason is because she and her mom read every book together. Well, her mom died over the summer, and reading ended for her. But she and her mom had loved The False Prince, and so she came to the lunch just because she had loved this book. And just for that few minutes, she smiled, and she laughed, and she had joy again in books. There is nothing for me that replaces the joy of getting to interact with readers.
That's awesome. You're gonna break me up. Okay. Well, Roland, how about you? What's your favorite part about being an author?
Well, there's actually three things, and they're all right up there. First of all, I love doing the research for my books because I get to learn about things that I want to learn about. And in a way, I get paid to do that, which is a nice benefit. I love writing the first draft because I don't really care what's in it. I kind of know what the story is going to be, and it's kind of kind of an organic process that I really like. And when I first got my first book published in 1995 and stuff, one of the benefits of being an author, which I didn't know anything about for a couple of years, was school visits. I absolutely love visiting schools and talking to kids face to face about not just my books, but about reading in general and animals and the things I'm interested in. That is such a thrill. And over this last year where we haven't been able to go out and do that, I really came to a realization how much I really miss that face-to-face contact with kids, which we're not having anymore. And of course, you teachers are undergoing the same thing. If you're doing things remotely and stuff, it's just not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing as to being face-to-face with people. And I hope that kind of kicks back into action in the fall. You know, probably it's not going to happen this year. I mean, this school year, but hopefully next year we'll start doing this, our thing again. I actually really miss that.
All right. Dan, I have to let you know, we've got to go pretty quick because we can't start the next one till we end this one.
I'll be quick.
Yeah, what's your favorite thing?
Well, everybody said everything I was going to say anyway, but I'll just add that none of us got into this to save the world. Okay, we got into it for other reasons, but you start doing it and you realize that just by writing some silly words on the page, you can make such a positive impact in a kid's life, and that is so rewarding. So I'll just add one last thing, which is I love the freedom that we have, okay? We have no boss telling us what to do. We can work at home. We can dress like a slob. And that's like the best thing. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was grow up and have a job where I didn't have to wear a tie. And so I fulfilled my lifetime's goal. And that's all I have to say.
You all, I have to just wrap this up really quick. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate each one of you and all that you do in changing the world in the life of a child. Thanks for joining us. And for our audience, we do have Dusti and Roland do have sessions at 11, but if we don't log off right now, we can't do the next one. So thank you. Love you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Good to see all of you. Bye-bye.
See you guys.